Regions and cities find themselves at a critical juncture. They strive for attractiveness at a time of trade and FDI disruption following several economic shocks, from the COVID pandemic to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, and they strive against the backdrop of challenges raised by climate, technological, and demographic change, which are not impacting OECD regions in the same way. And often, non-metropolitan areas are often the hardest hit. So to support policymakers in navigating this changing environment, we launched a large-scale project on rethinking regional attractiveness, which currently includes 25 regions across 10 countries in Europe, Latin America, and Morocco. So the project helps policymakers to assess how regions fare in globalization and how they can enhance their attractiveness to the key international target groups of investors, talent, and visitors. And we know regions face significant challenges across all these three dimensions. So to inform this work, we have launched this series of webinars on rethinking regional attractiveness to hear more directly from experts and practitioners. So the first three webinars in the series covered what makes a region attractive in the new global environment, making ports and logistic network assets for regional development, and the third was on rethinking the attractiveness of tourism regions. You can find all these webinars online on our website, and I think you will have the link on the chat in a minute. And today we will be shifting towards a stronger focus on how to attract investment and how to geographically spread the benefits of these investments. So this brings me to the heart of the matters of today's webinar, which is the focus on special economic zones and how they can be utilized to enhance the attractiveness of non-metropolitan areas. Special economic zones have been a very popular tool used by many regions over the past 60, 70 years to help attract investment and, by extension, talent. They have also been subject to criticisms, notably linked to the fact that they can create anti-competitive niches with limited multiplier effects. Over the years, there has been substantial innovation in terms of what these investment zones are designed to achieve, and today they span every continent and they take many different forms. Policymakers today utilize special economic zones for a range of purposes in both urban and non-metropolitan areas, with objectives including to revitalize distressed areas, to support the development of selected industries or sectors, or to facilitate value-added manufacturing or trade. So Claire, in a minute, we'll discuss the different types of special economic zones in her intervention. We will hear from different country examples in our two sessions of this webinar, including from the recent legislation in Costa Rica aiming to develop special economic zones specifically in non-metropolitan regions and in certain sectors such as agriculture. So our work on regional...
Notre travail sur le développement régional a montré qu'il est important pour...
È importante che i decisori politici abbiano un approccio integrato quando devono...
que es importante que los legisladores tengan una visión.
First, governance mechanism for special economic zones should be as collaborative as possible, involving different levels of government as well as industry and civil society. And second, ideally, the success of a special economic zone should be measured according to its overall economic and social and environmental impact, including its role in reducing territorial disparities. So we will dig deeper in these issues today, and I very much look forward to the discussion. Again, thank you all for your participation. And without further ado, I will now turn to Anna Novick, head of the investment division in the OECD Directorate for Financial and Enterprise Affairs, who I thank very much for being with us to provide some introductory remarks. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks, Dorothea, and thanks all of you. I will speak in Spanish using this opportunity. because normally I don't have the chance to talk in Spanish at the OECD. That means that I will take this chance right now. Buenos días y buenas tardes a todos. Estoy muy contenta de participar en este evento organizado por mis colegas de la División de Desarrollo Regional.
Événement organisé par les collègues de la division.
Este objetivo de asesorar a los gobiernos en políticas que
o
ayuden
governo em políticas que ajudem a um desenvolvimento mais.
Sviluppare in modo più inclusivo e sostenibile.
Conheço bem a Cíntia e é um prazer ver aqui.
De inversiones con una gran reputación, pero también forman parte de la red de agencias de promoción de inversiones de la OCDE y siempre nos complace apoyarlos. La inversión extranjera directa es una fuente importante de financiación, no solo para el crecimiento, sino también para el desarrollo inclusivo y sostenible. Algunos de ustedes están familiarizados, pero tenemos en la OECD hemos desarrollado indicadores de calidad que demuestran cómo la inversión extranjera puede crear empleos, fomentar la productividad, mejorar habilidades laborales, innovación y también disminuir la emisión de carbono, pero estos impactos no son automáticos. Entonces, hemos trabajado un poco cómo mezclar las políticas de inversión con otras políticas. Un tema importante.
One of the topics that is important is the growth in countries, and we see a major difference between developed and less developed countries in this process. We can see it at the level of the people and at the level of cities. It can be a powerful driver.
Inversiones fuera de los principales centros económicos se ha convertido en un gran desafío para muchos países y sabemos que también es un gran desafío para Costa Rica. Así que este es el propósito de este evento, es ver cómo mis colegas, particularmente de desarrollo regional, pueden ayudar a Costa Rica y compartir la experiencia de otros países. En este contexto, la red de agencias de promoción de inversiones de la OECD, que funciona vinculado al trabajo del Comité de Inversiones, desarrolló el año pasado un especial énfasis en este tema de la inversión extranjera.
In the regional.
Cette thématique du développement régional.
Prácticas.
Na análise das várias práticas e das agências de investimento.
Best practices, and to have that comparative analysis, then let me share some of the showing that we obtained. Our analysis indicates that regional disparities.
Gli investimenti stranieri all'interno dei paesi dell'OCSE sono molto maggiori.
Greater out of the OECD, and they vary.
Un país donde las disparidades regionales en materia de recepción de inversión extranjera es bastante alta. Obviamente, como lo dijo Dorothée, las situaciones geopolíticas y económicas que estamos viviendo todos no ayudan, y creo que tampoco en el tema de la inversión regional, porque obviamente en regiones remotas o económicamente más aisladas es más desafiante llevar inversiones, y las condiciones actuales no van a ayudar un poco a esto. Entonces, en el fondo, ¿qué políticas se pueden implementar? ¿Cómo las agencias pueden ayudar para que esto pueda funcionar mejor? Nuestras evidencias indican que el papel de la promoción de inversiones es importante para abordar las disparidades regionales y que ya ocupa un lugar destacado en muchas de las agencias. Casi todos los países de la OCDE tienen una dimensión regional en las estrategias nacionales de promoción de inversión, y más de 2/3 tienen estrategias específicas para promover la inversión en las regiones. El desarrollo regional es una prioridad máxima para el 90% de estas agencias. Esto incluye a CINDE, que también lo tiene como una prioridad. Sin embargo, las estrategias de promoción de inversiones aún deben abordar varios desafíos. Y esto es un poco lo que hemos estado conversando. Hay desafíos institucionales de cómo se vinculan mejor con las agencias de desarrollo regional, pero también hay desafíos en las propias regiones, que es un poco lo que están trabajando nuestros colegas, de cómo hacer estas regiones más atractivas, donde las zonas económicas especiales, que va a ser el tema principal de hoy día, pueden ser también una herramienta importante. Les deseo un debate fructífero, espero que este evento siga reforzando la relación con CINDE, pero también nuestra colaboración con la División de Desarrollo Regional y Multigobernanza, que nosotros realmente valoramos para hacer de la inversión extranjera una herramienta para el desarrollo regional.
Muchas gracias, Anna. I will switch to English. And so my name is Claire Charbier. I'm very glad to welcome you to this seminar. So good morning, good afternoon to all. Thank you, Dorothée and Anna, for your opening remarks and to remind us the context of our discussion today. So I want also to thank, of course, our partners in Costa Rica and from the European Commission for their support to this event. Let's now move to the first session of our webinar. So the broad definition of what is a special economic zone, something like geographically delimited.
Du point de vue géographique, les
que determinado Estado oferece incentivos
donde los gobiernos ofrecen condiciones económicas especiales. Y en práctica esta definición cubre una amplia variedad de tipos de zonas económicas especiales. Deberíamos tener en cuenta diferentes dimensiones. Primero, el objetivo. Por ejemplo, algunos tienen como objetivo la revitalización.
Or in region with specific challenges, like the French territories of industry, we will hear about this afternoon, this second session, or like the ones implemented in the south of Italy, and we will hear about it very soon with the one experience in Sicily. We could also quote here the policy for extreme zones in Chile, the northern and the southern part of Chile, they benefit from this type of mechanism. Some other special economic zone aim at more specific objectives, and one very known one is the promoting export by attracting investors in key export sectors, including services, as it is often the case in East and Southeast Asia, as well as in South and Central America. In Costa Rica, and we will hear a lot about Costa Rica, free trade zones are, for the moment, concentrated in the capital region, and more than half of all Costa Rica's export originate from these free trade zones. So we will learn about it in the second session. Second, the taxonomy should also build on the instrument. What are the incentives used to attract investors in special economic zone? So there are very traditional, tools like tax advantages to investors in Italy, well, more or less in the great majority of free trade zone, we can observe them. There are also exemption of duties, which is extensively used, sometimes associated with specific logistic hubs. In Spain, they have the export processing zones in port regions, like in Valencia, we work with a region we work with. There are other cases without financial incentives, like the French territoire d'industrie, and rather what they offer are more a kind of administrative simplification and an availability of land, which is also rare resources nowadays. So such taxonomy should also distinguish between sectoral specialization. We will hear about Pomerania in Poland, who opt for a very diversified approach to settle its economic zone, focusing on manufacture and services and aiming at promoting innovation. It will be soon presented by Voschier. In other cases, like in the UK, for example, the approach is more geared towards specialized economic zone, some kind of cluster development. In Morocco, we work also with one region, which is the northern part, Tanger, Tétouan, Al-Hoceima. They use extensively industrial zones, sometimes very specialized, like agropole, for example, that Costa Rica could have an interest in. This variety limits the availability of one-fits-all type of assessment about special economic zone impact and drawbacks, in particular in terms of economic development versus crowding out effect. It's indeed key that such mechanisms don't increase or lead to new territorial disparities between the incumbent and external actors. So what can be told at this stage is that existing evaluation, like the one of ESPON, which provided recently a report, have underlined special economic zone positive impact on employment and investment. However, underlines that some initial conditions should be made available. In particular, the need to have some kind of initial stock of investment and infrastructure in lagging places. Our work also underlined that it's very challenging to attract investors without attracting talent. So one key condition is, of course, the availability of skills. Last but not least, special economic zone outcomes also largely depend from their governance structure, which should be a specific dimension of any taxonomy. Multi-level governance conditions their effective implementation, and again, different models coexist. We will hear about the special commissioner in Italy, which is selected by the central government to monitor and pilot local special economic zone, which is quite different from the recent approach in France, including different levels of government as well as private stakeholders. So today we have the opportunity to dig deeper in this variety of approaches. And this first session will allow us to learn more from two specific experiences, the one of Pomerania in Poland and the one of Eastern Sicily in Italy. Questions, remember, are welcome on the chat, and I will share them with our speakers at the end of this session. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Mr. Wojciech Tyborowski. I hope my pronunciation is correct, who is Director of Invest Pomerania and who will use a PowerPoint presentation. Wojciech, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Claire, for that introduction. That was a pretty much perfect pronunciation, so kudos. Wonderful. It's not an easy language, and I will have a little game for you during this short interview, short information about the Polish investment zone. First of all, fun fact for you guys, this is the picture that you see in the background of the slide was actually generated by one of those new tools that uses artificial intelligence to generate images. So actually, we asked, please generate some images about Pomerania region. This is what it actually provided. It shows that yes, Pomerania region is a coastal region located in northern Poland. So we are deeply connected with the maritime economy. We're deeply connected with the shipyard industry. However, over the last 10 years, also the technology sector is growing fast. Business services are growing fast. And the new thing for Poland and for our region, because we have this coastal location, is the offshore wind sector. So that's in terms of the quick introduction from our end. And about the Polish investment zone. So as I would like to divide this story into two time periods. So as Claire said, yes, Polish investment zone is right now covering a wide range of activities. This is actually fairly new. This legislation was introduced in 2018, 2019. Since 1994, when the special economic zones were established in Poland, it was focused solely on industrial projects. On the right hand of the slide, you see a map of our region, which is divided into two zones, because in our region we have actually two special economic zones. These are separate entities which are dedicated to certain parts of our region, and that was established, as I said, in 1994. It started as this model started when this model started. It was focused on the land ownership. So special economic zones owned plots of land, and that was dedicated. These plots were dedicated for the development of industrial activities, and only on those investment plots, companies could have obtained the tax exemption from the corporate income tax. because
sorry, Wojciech, sorry
yes.
to interrupt. We have some complaint about the quality of the sound, and our interpreters face a difficulty.
Okay,
Could
I will
you
just
change
take those off.
something? Sorry to interrupt.
Now,
Please continue.
okay, can you hear me right now? Well, is it okay?
I think it's better.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
no problem. So as I said, in the 90s, this model was based on the special economic zones owning the plots of land, and if the company would like to use the big benefit of the tax exemption, they had to actually either rent this plot of land from the special economic zone or buy it. Then they were eligible for the tax exemption. As I said, it was focused on the industrial activities, manufacturing activities, and I would say it was pretty successful in reference to the topic of the today's meeting. So in actually supporting non-metropolitan areas in the Polish regions, because usually those special economic zones were located outside of those outside of large cities. For example, in our case, in the southern part of our region, I would say like in the bottom right corner of our region, we have a city, Tczew. That's actually a fun game for everyone to, if they would like to try to speak Polish. This is a very good word for the beginners. I would repeat it. Tczew, it's a name of a little town. It's a 40,000 people town, and they actually had a quite well prospering special economic zone. It attracted like 5 or 6 large corporations, mostly in the manufacturing of electronics components or automotive sector. So we had like companies like Flexder, Eaton, Handling from Sweden, Thales, and Gardner, all together employing something around 5,000 to 6,000 people. So in a town of 40,000, it actually was a great boost for that town. Why the companies was choosing such town, not a metropolitan area of Tri-City? Because, well, first of all, this tax exemption, access to talent, because usually those special economic zones were created in towns where there was some kind of a previous, I would say, tradition of manufacturing activities. So we had some kind of schools there. We also had some kind of those plot lands were cheaper because they were outside of the core areas. So over the time, sometime between 2010, 2018, we saw less interest from the foreign investors with the special economic zones, mostly because they were not interested with the land offered by special economic zones. As I said, it was based on the specific locations that were owned by the special economic zones, and they kind of lost their attractiveness, either due to the changes in the infrastructure, because Poland went through the massive transformation of the infrastructure, transportation infrastructure in 2012, because of the Euro 2012. So those investment plots were kind of, I don't know, either more distant from the major communication links, or, for example, I don't know, they were disconnected from the major transportation routes. So also in the special economic zones, those companies had an interest to attract more projects, so they initiated a change in the legislation, and the whole Poland became the special economic zone, meaning right now in Poland, the company has a flexibility, so they can choose any plot of land in our country and apply for the status. If they meet the criteria, this tax exemption will be provided. And here's what happened in Poland since 2019. So introduction of this qualitative and quantitative criteria was actually, they were introduced with a goal to support less developed locations. So the idea was still to support
non-metropolitan areas. But what actually happened, and we can actually move to the next slide, it kind of, because those criteria links to the unemployment rate in the region and the size of a company. So basically the rule is, if the larger the company is, the larger the investment has to be eligible for the tax exemption. It actually drives away large investment projects from the special economic zone, because even large corporations right now do not have such substantial investment projects. Because, for example, if someone would like to have investment project in Gdańsk, which is the capital city of Pomerania region, as it is, because it's a capital city, it has the lowest unemployment rate in the region, they would have to invest around 100 million Polish zloty. So this is, we see that it is a kind of a challenge for even for the large companies. So they say, okay, we have like an investment project of, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 million Polish zloty. We are not eligible. They still invest, but they became not eligible for the tax exemptions. What we see that special economic zones right now in Poland mostly service small and medium companies, usually Polish. So we see that there are, as I said, there are 14 special economic zones in Poland. They serve approximately on average like 60, 70 companies per year. 90% of that is SMEs. And what else happened? Because of this criteria, so the quantitative criteria actually promote small and medium companies. They are more restrictive towards the large corporations. They are more restrictive towards the more developed parts of the region. We see that still large corporations, even if they are not eligible for the tax exemption, they will choose more developed regions because, for example, because of the access to talent, access to research infrastructure, which is usually located at the universities, because, for example, they are usually export-oriented, so proximity to port area is important for them. They also seek, like, I would say they seek more mature markets. So to conclude, maybe we can move to the next slide. Oh yeah, the qualitative criteria. Just quickly, but yeah, we can move to the next slide. Qualitative criteria, these are the qualitative criteria. Basically, they are, the companies are asked to provide something more to the region. So for example, they need to, in less developed parts of the region, they need to like check at least 4 criteria from the list. In the more developed parts of the region, they have to like check like, I don't know, 6 or 7, depends on the level of development of that area. And these are purely related to the, I would say, the core area of activities of the company. Because, for example, we asked whether they conduct research and development activities, or, for example, whether they are planning to some cooperation with suppliers, local suppliers. In conclusion, if the question is how did Polish special economic zones supported the development of non-metropolitan area in Poland over the last nearly 30 years, I would say it's hard to say. Because historically, I can say that the previous model really supported the development of the regions that were outside of the metropolitan areas in Poland. What we see right now, we have development of small and medium companies in those non-core areas, but we can see that it doesn't really support the trend of narrowing this gap in development between the metropolitan area and the more like sub-regional or non-metropolitan areas. We can see that this gap in development, it's actually pretty much the same over time. Yeah, I think that's it from my end for today.
Thank you very much, Wojciech. So we already have some questions that I will ask after the second presentation. It's clear about the evolution and the fact that sometimes financial advantages are not enough to attract large investors in some specific areas. So let's now gear toward Italy, and in particular the eastern part of Sicily. And I'm glad to welcome Valerio Buemi, who is a senior expert to the special economic zone of Eastern Sicily, who will present this approach from Italy. So Valerio, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Mrs. Charby. First of all, I would like to convey the greetings of the Special Commissioner for the Eastern Sicily SEZ, Professor Di Graziano, who unfortunately couldn't attend this webinar because of some academic commitments. However, I will do my best for replacing him well. I would like to say that with me there is also Mr. Massimo Cartalemi, the project manager of Eastern Sicily SEZ, who will give me support during the question time for specific questions about tax topics. First of all, I would like to introduce the idea of special economic zone in Italy. The institution of economic zones in Italy is quite recent. The Italian government established them in 2017, and the implementation of the appointment of government commissioners for managing and directing these zones happened in 2021. So as you can see, it is a very, very new tool for Italy. Of course, the aim of this decision was to fill the gap between northern Italy, that is the most developed area in economic terms of our country, and southern Italy. I would like to remind to our audience that there are 8 special economic zones in Italy. In Sicily, there are 2, the eastern one and the western one. Then there is Abruzzo, Sardinia, Campania, 2 in Apulia, and Calabria. So we can talk about an Italian special economic zones, and when we deal with the foreign countries, our aim will be always to promote the Italian special economic zones. However, today we will focus on our special economic zone. Sicily was defined by the Italian government and the region of Sicily, starting from our infrastructures. There are 5 main seaports: Messina, Messina with Milazzo are 2 different towns, but they are considered as one seaport. Catania, Augusta, Pozzallo, and Gela. So we cover from the northern part of Eastern Coast to the southern part of Eastern Coast, all the eastern part of Sicily, and the inland. So there is this strong connection between the seaside and the inland. So because of this decision of starting from the harbors, the first thing to say about the Eastern Sicily SEZ is the logistic potential of our special zone, because Sicily is in the center of the Mediterranean Sea, is a natural bridge between Europe, Africa, and Asia. Our history is a demonstration of that, and in our time, the logistic potential is very clear. And for this reason, we will see the infrastructural intervention that are connected to our special economic zone. And along with this, it is important to remark that in Sicily, there are already important industrial districts in the technology sector. For instance, it is very relevant to the production of micro electronics and nanoelectronic devices, semiconductors. Sicily is, the Eastern Sicily is the headquarters of ST Microelectronics, that is one of the main players in the production of semiconductors globally. Then the pharmaceutical sector, the industrial plants that were the previous refineries of oil in the southern part of Eastern Sicily, that are now moving from the refinery process of oil to a green transition for the production of green energy. And last but not least, the importance of the food processing sector, because we have a very rich agriculture with products that are excellent in terms of quality. So there are many important companies that process this food and export it all over the world. Next slide, please. As regards the governance, as Mrs. Charby said before, there is a central level that is connected to a national steering committee that is constituted by several ministries, the Ministry for South and Territorial Cohesion, that is our direct interlocutor, the Ministry of Regional Affairs, Public Administration, of course, the Ministries of Economy and Economic Development, that work in a very close coordination with the local entities, such as the regions. 7 presidents of regions are part of the special economic zone process, along with the commissioners. The commissioners that are appointed by the presidency of the Council of Ministers, and they have a very, very important role in this project because they coordinate and drive all the operation for enhancing the attractiveness of the special economic zone. They identify the priorities and even the perimeter of the special economic zones. They implement the projects that are connected to the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. And they have also a very important administrative role that we will see in a few minutes.
Que veremos más adelante, o sea, el autorizar, procesar las alteraciones únicas de las zonas económicas especiales y la puerta central, que es una de las ventajas que ofrecemos a las empresas que quieren invertir en esta zona económica especial. Ven aquí ustedes muy rápidamente. Ese es el enlace para nuestra geolocación, nuestro sistema GPS, para que todo el mundo pueda entender cuáles son las áreas.
Use this link for having a clearer idea about the geographical entity of our SEZ. Our SEZ is constituted by 39 municipalities. There are 2 metropolitan cities, Catania and Messina, and 3 major cities, Syracuse, Enna, and Ragusa. So as regards the relationship between the centers, the metropolitan areas, and the non-metropolitan areas, for sure, the idea behind the Eastern Sicily SEZ is to create a continuous cooperation between the metropolitan areas and the inland. So this is, I think, a very important point to stress. The total area of our SEZ is 3,670 hectares, and in the map on your right, with blue color, are stress the areas with the higher concentration of companies, both commercial and manufacturing companies. As you can see, all the areas that are close to seaports are more relevant for the presence of businesses and companies, while the inner part of Sicily is more focused on agriculture. So one of our aims is also to rebalance this relation between the seaside and the inland. Next slide, please. As regards the plan for the national recovery and resilience, what I want to say is that the special economic zone can enjoy financial resources for 630 million euros that will be dedicated to the infrastructural improvement of our area, with three main lines of action. The so-called last mile connection, because unfortunately there are many infrastructures in our area where what lacks is just a simple road or a rotatory or a railway infrastructure that must be finished. And because of the bureaucratic problems that sometimes our local administrations have to face, it is very, very irrelevant that the SEZ can intervene and support the local administrations in filling this gap. Secondly, the digitization of logistics and the works dedicated to the efficiency of energy and environment, and of course the strengthening of the infrastructure's resiliency and safety. We believe that this kind of intervention will give, let's say, a more appealing characteristics to our special economic zone. Next slide, please.
So, sorry, Valerio,
please.
If you can conclude.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
So I will focus on the incentive, the tax and administrative incentives that are mainly three. There is administrative simplification. The companies can address themselves directly to our SEZ, and we created a single digital gateway that where the companies can register themselves, and they will deal directly with us instead of the the municipalities or local entities for establishing their business in the special economic zones. And as regards taxation, we offer tax incentives in terms of a tax credit up to 100 million euros to all the companies that want to invest in the special economic zones. Okay, I finish here for the moment, and I hope that I can say something more during the question and answers session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Indeed, we have some questions, but we are a little bit late. So just very briefly, let's have one question for each of you. Colleagues and people in the chat would like to know what are the special economic zone incentives other than taxes, in particular about customs. And so do you have some specific advantages offered in terms of customs? As regard, other questions, I would like to ask them to Valerio. They concern the logic of having different special economic zone under an umbrella strategy. So one question is about Central America umbrella that could attract investors, and then we will have, of course, to manage the localization of investors. So just to characterize this type of cooperation and competition, what are the relationship between the two special economic zones that exist in Sicily? So if you can respond very briefly, and then we can switch to other, and we will forward, of course, the questions.
I will be super brief because there are no other than tax relief benefits from being from the special economic zone. There might be a case that the special economic zone is also a tax-free duty area, but this is probably is an exception. I really cannot, put my mind on that. So I would say no extra benefits.
Okay. And Valerio, the competition versus cooperation.
No, actually, there is no competition, there is cooperation, because for each special economic zone, there is a different specialization. So the industrial specialization of Western Sicily are different from the one of Eastern Sicily, and there is the same mechanism for the other special economic zones in Italy. So there is cooperation and no competition.
Thank you very much. And of course, if we receive, and we received the other question, we will forward it to you, and you can draft the responses. So after these two very concrete examples with different types of objectives, structure, incentives, governance, I suggest that we can now open the second session. And in this session, we will have the opportunity to directly focus on the non-metropolitan, more rural areas, and consider their attractiveness through special economic zone in relation to agri-food development as a tool to address the territorial disparity. So please, again, ask your question and comment on the chat so I can share them with our speakers at the end of this session. And so now it's my great honor and pleasure to welcome Mrs. Indiana Trejos, Vice Minister of Foreign Trade in Costa Rica, who will intervene in Spanish. So, dear Señora Trejos, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Claire. Muy buenos días a todos. Buenas tardes a quienes nos acompañan desde París. Estimados expertos de la OCDE, representantes de la Unión Europea, colegas de CINDE, estimada audiencia. En primer lugar, quisiera agradecer a las diferentes direcciones de la OCDE por la organización de este importante webinar. Costa Rica ha venido impulsando una clara y consistente política de atracción de inversión extranjera durante casi 3 décadas. Algunas de las claves del éxito de nuestra política ha sido precisamente analizar los factores externos e internos al momento de diseñarlas. Todo esto con el objetivo de lograr inversiones que generen oportunidades de empleo y un mayor valor agregado en términos de transferencia tecnológica y conocimiento.
Value in knowledge, technology. We know firsthand that investment is a very important engine to raise the level of people's livelihoods. It's transformative. Only in a couple of days, and years, community.
Au niveau de ces entreprises que nous appelons, donc effectivement, ce sont des moteurs de changement et avec leur contribution, surtout en termes d'emploi de qualité.
De qualidade, de investimentos produtivos e tiveram impacto nas comunidades a todos os níveis, nomeadamente
impulsoras para atraer mayor inversión en esos mismos sectores, como imanes de mayor inversión. Entonces, comprendiendo la importancia de la inversión como mecanismos de desarrollo, ha sido de nuestro gran interés continuar atrayendo y expandiendo inversión en el país, con los retos que obviamente esto conlleva, porque estamos compitiendo con todo el mundo. Hoy, al igual que muchos otros países, Costa Rica tiene el reto de atraer esta inversión a regiones fuera del gran área metropolitana. Y esto lo hemos hecho, lo consideramos fundamental, tomando en cuenta que existen brechas muy importantes a nivel social y económico entre las gran áreas metropolitanas y las regiones fuera de ella. Por lo tanto, hemos identificado las fortalezas y debilidades que tiene cada región, de manera que podamos elaborar herramientas para crear las condiciones requeridas para que lleguen oportunidades de inversión a estas diferentes regiones. Y fue precisamente en este contexto que impulsamos y pusimos en vigor la Ley de Fortalecimiento de la Competitividad Territorial para promover la atracción de inversiones fuera de la gran área metropolitana, así como los reglamentos que acompañan la ley. A través de este novedoso marco normativo, los inversionistas tendrán 11 nuevos incentivos para optar por establecer sus proyectos en zonas alejadas del área metropolitana. Esto nos ilusiona enormemente, pues estamos convencidos que son una importante señal en la dirección correcta para motivar a empresas a traer sus proyectos a estas zonas y así tener un efecto dinamizador sobre estas regiones. Un ejemplo concreto de los espacios que abre esta normativa es brindar la posibilidad de que actividades que antes no podían operar dentro del régimen de zona franca, ahora puedan hacerlo si se instalan en las zonas fuera de la gran área metropolitana. Estos son sectores en los que visualizamos un gran potencial por sus características naturales. Uno de ellos es el sector de empresas proveedoras de insumos agrícolas, pecuarios y pesqueros, que serían insumos para otras empresas de zona franca que utilizan en sus procesos productivos. Nuestro país tradicionalmente ha tenido una vocación agrícola y hemos sido muy exitosos en la diversificación de productos. Además, continuamos con ciertas condiciones que podemos potenciar y mejorar para dar el salto hacia procesos más sofisticados de tecnificación de la agricultura. Por ello, el intercambio de experiencias que hoy podemos realizar en este foro será un insumo muy valioso para nutrirnos y fortalecernos en nuestros planes de acción futura. Consideramos este webinar un primer paso en el trabajo de atractividad regional y continuaremos trabajando de manera muy estrecha con la OCDE y participando activamente en los diferentes grupos de trabajo de la organización, en especial en el marco, del Comité de Desarrollo Regional y del FDI Qualities del Comité de Inversión, los cuales estamos seguros contribuirán a repensar y replantear la forma de diseñar políticas públicas efectivas para nuestro país. Todo esto es un trabajo que venimos realizando desde hace mucho tiempo y es una muestra clara y contundente de la prioridad que esta administración le está dando al impulso al desarrollo y a la reducción de las brechas existentes en entre la gran área metropolitana y las zonas rurales. Y desde el sector de comercio exterior, conformado por el ministerio que represento, por la promotora del comercio exterior, y por la Asociación Costarricense de Promoción de las Inversiones, CINDE, continuaremos trabajando arduamente para que la inversión se convierta en un real motor de desarrollo en nuestro país. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, señora Vice Minister, and thank you for your, wish to continue working together on both sides for regional development, fighting against disparities, as well as promoting investment. So now let's welcome Mr. Jorge Sequeira Picado, who is precisely the General Manager of Invest in Costa Rica, CINDE, our partner to this event, and I want to thank you here also. So could you please, Jorge, let us know what are the priorities, concretely of the Costa Rica strategy to enhance regional development with the new law of free zone regime for non-metropolitan areas. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claire, and it's a pleasure to be here sharing with all of you today. Let me thank also our Vice Minister Trejos for joining us today. And I want to say hello to my good friend, Ana Novik, of course. And I want to go back also to October 2022, when, when I had the opportunity to meet with Dorothy, Claire, Maya, Michael, and the Regional Development and Attractiveness Division, which gave birth, I think, to this whole initiative. And I'm glad that we're finally here to talk about it and share best practices. Let me go back again to 2022, October, and that Investment Promotion Agency network meeting that we had. And I want to share with you just the words that Dr. Martin Casper shared with us that day. He was representing the private sector. And he said, I applaud all the efforts that each one of you, investment promotion agencies are doing to help the regional development. But you're doing it wrong, because you're focusing on why you as a country, or why you as an investment promotion agency want to bring investment into these regions outside the greater metropolitan areas. And he said, but you know what? That's irrelevant to us. That's irrelevant to us, the private sector, because what we need is competitiveness. What we need are regions where we find the right conditions to do business. And he said, so stop focusing on why it is important for the country, for you as an IPA. Focus on enhancing that.
El país o para mí que yo venga, centraros en crear las condiciones para que hagamos negocios. Y la verdad es que fue fantástico que fuese tan claro. Y esto es lo que hemos venido a hablar aquí, la competitividad regional. Si no abordamos este tema, no tendremos éxito a la hora de atraer el desarrollo y la inversión en regiones fuera de las regiones, de las zonas metropolitanas. Y esto es lo que hemos visto a lo largo de los últimos 8 años. Hemos trabajado con comunidades rurales, no creando material de marketing fantástico, pero hemos trabajado junto con ellos con una guía que les ayudará a entender cuáles son las brechas en su competitividad. ¿Qué es lo que se está haciendo en la
supply, in costs, in infrastructure, in water, in all the basics that any company that's looking to invest anywhere in the world is going to be asking. Those are the questions they're going to be asking. So that has been our job over the last 8 years, to work with these communities in understanding what those gaps are and in trying to close those gaps. And of course, our Vice Minister touched upon a very, very important topic, which is this law that we passed, this very progressive and let's call it next gen incentives type of law, that will provide a differentiation for these regions in real costs, in lowering direct salary costs, in lowering energy costs, in providing more incentives for the longer term for companies that decide to invest in these regions, because we have to, tilt that balance at some point and make those companies, look at these regions, make it attractive for them to look at these regions. Now, we haven't done this alone. It can't be done alone. It is a nation building initiative in which, all the parts need to work together: central government, local governments, academia, and of course the private sector, which drives all the investment. And in this sense, I do want to applaud the work of the National Network of Development Agencies here in Costa Rica, RENADEL, which has been very active on working together with us, with all the local communities around the country, in each one of these topics that I just mentioned. So now with this, empowered with this new law, and with the government that is very, very committed, as Vice Minister Trejos said, to bring in these opportunities outside the greater metropolitan area, we are absolutely focused from CINDE in continue building together with this full ecosystem more opportunities that hopefully will bring more possibilities and more development to the regions outside the Central Valley of Costa Rica. So thank you again, OECD, for making this webinar possible. We're very excited to be here with all of you today and to listen to all this best practice sharing. And I hope we have a great rest of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Jorge. And we better say, thank to Vice Minister and you, the wish to build this kind of ecosystem for growth and joints more balanced, allocated in a more balanced way across places in Costa Rica. So for the benefit, of course, of inclusiveness and sustainability, as it was reminded to us by Anna in her introductory remark. So let's now go to the Secretariat, and I'm glad to invite my colleague, Mrs. Adriana Garcia Vargas, who is economist in the Trade and Agriculture Directorate of the OECD, who will help us contextualize, if I may, the strategy of Costa Rica considering global trade and agriculture trends. So Adriana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Claire, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Well, as you were saying, I will briefly refer to findings from OECD research on attracting FDI and promoting value creation in the agricultural and food sector, and also to OECD instrument to promote responsible agro-food investments. Investment in the agro-food sector can play a critical role in increasing incomes, improving food security, and supporting rural development. It can also be a vehicle to generate positive spillovers for the local economy through business linkages, the transfer of knowledge, and the dissemination of new technologies. At the OECD Trade and Agriculture Directorate, we have done some analysis of the impact of FDI on participation and value added creation in agro-food global value chains, and also on the influence of government policies on the FDI in the agro-food sector. I will discuss some of the findings from our research papers and also from our country policy reviews. In general, global FDI inflows in primary agriculture and in food processing are relatively small, especially when compared with industry and services. But still the sector is an important source of foreign capital in many countries. And within the agro-food value chain, food processing has the largest share of cross-border investment activity, with multinational food and beverage.
Con las empresas, las multinacionales alimenticias, además, obtienen también grandes cantidades de financiación. La inversión se concentra en centros regionales específicos. Otro hallazgo interesante es que los fondos internacionales directos, a la financiación internacional directa, tiene un enlace positivo y significativo entre los indicadores de participación y la creación de cadenas de valor añadido domésticas. Esto sugiere que la actividad de inversión extranjera crea resultados positivos a nivel local. Las decisiones de inversión directa extranjera tienen diferentes motivaciones estratégicas que pueden ser complementar las exportaciones, acceso a insumos, materiales primas, tierra agrícola, incluso el acceso a la mejora de la huella climática y el acceso a o reflejar la demanda de los consumidores de una materia prima responsable y sostenible. Además, las políticas son importantes, es decir, una fuerte protección de la inversión, una fuerte protección de la propiedad de la tierra, de los derechos de las tierras, incentivos tributarios, entre otras políticas de inversión. Además, está la armonización de los requisitos técnicos que pueden aumentar la inversión extranjera directa. Los sistemas de innovación agrícola dinámica son cruciales. Esto incluye una gran protección de los
and well-funded agro-food research and development institutions and extension services. Policies to support supply chain linkages can also facilitate the business activities of investors. Countries can encourage positive spillovers from agro-food multinational enterprises by introducing a comprehensive regulatory framework, a system of contract enforcement, ensuring also strong capabilities among domestic firms, building integrated domestic supply chains, and developing an organized base of local suppliers. In general, an enabling investment of climate for agro-food FDI requires addressing a broad set of policies, of course, a wide range, paying attention, for example, to aspects such as responsible business conducts, employment, labor market regulations, agricultural support policies, environmental policies, taxations, and other areas also like reducing business bottlenecks, developing or improving transport infrastructure, access to information and communication technologies, promoting human capitals and skills development, and improving access to finance in the agro-food value chains. And just to finalize, how to promote investments that not only generate economic benefits, but also are socially and environmentally responsible. The OECD has guidance instruments for this, and we have, for example, the OECD FAO Guidance for Responsible Agricultural Supply Chains, which was developed in 2016 to encourage multinational enterprises in the sector to observe key internationally agreed standards for responsible business conduct. And this is a guidance for companies of all sizes along the agro-food supply chains and addressing different areas of risk that may arise in the agri-food sector. And we also have among this international standard, the OECD Principles for Responsible Investment in Agriculture and Food Systems, which is a self-assessment tool that governments interested in creating an attractive environment for investors and in enhancing the development benefits of agricultural investment can use. This instrument can help also attract not only more, but better agro-food investments that can also support the transformation to more sustainable and resilient agriculture and food systems. Thank you very much for that, Diane.
Thank you very much, Adriana. And so now we know that we have a package of good practices, self-evaluation tool, self-assessment tool that could help, FDI. We also learned that the quality of governance is, of course, determinant to condition, of course, the attractiveness of these companies and the variety of, access to good sourcing and the infrastructure at the local level, including also skills. So there is one question, but I think I will ask it generally speaking, and maybe colleagues who will share with us their experience could in their presentation help us to understand the answer. We received this question, which is about a sequence, should companies that invest in special economic zone be required to invest in physical and digital infrastructure? So in a sense, do they have also to pay for the infrastructure or human talent, by the way, to benefit to the wider region? Is it a condition for them to benefit from the advantages or not at all? And I'm sure that we will have different responses according to different places and approaches. So let's now, I would say, go in the north. We were in Costa Rica, and please now let me invite Mr. Chris McLeod. I don't know if I pronounce correctly, who is the Vice President for Global Marketing and Communications of Edmonton Global in Canada. So Chris, please speak with, let's share the experience of Port Alberta and your initiatives in Edmonton. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. And again, thanks so much for the invitation to be part of this. I'm actually changing, I think, a little bit of what I'm going to say based on just how excellent an introduction Adriana made. Many of the things that you talked about, Adriana, are the things that we're trying to do here across Canada and in our region. So I thought really you set us up very, very well for this conversation. I'm with Edmonton Global. We're an economic development agency here in the region that is Edmonton in Northern Canada. We run Port Alberta. So Port Alberta is our foreign trade zone. And we do this in partnership with our federal government, our provincial government, many other agencies across our region, including our international airport. And it's actually ourselves and our international airport that chair this organization that is Port Alberta. And I'll just flip to the next slide here. If you're not familiar with where we sit in Canada, of course, Canada is a very large, second largest country in the world by size, quite small by population, only about 35 million people. And in the province of Alberta, which is the next slide, we're more to the west of Canada. So when you think about the Great Prairies of Canada, one of the largest sources of crops in the world, we're on the western edge of this. Canada produces more peas, beans, and lentils, so pulses, than anywhere else in the world, more canola than anywhere else in the world. And we're in the top 3 to 5 producers in the world in most of the grains that are grown. So a very, very large base of primary agriculture. And I'll just slide to the next slide. So just a little bit about the Edmonton metropolitan region. We're the 5th largest economy in Canada. We have about 1.5 million people that live in our region, and it's quite a large space. The agricultural area actually has about 2.5 million acres, which is just over 1 million hectares of farmland. So again, quite large. That's encompassed by our region, and we're very very strong in things like artificial intelligence. Actually, 3rd in the world in that for research. We're a major center for oil and gas, and an emerging international center for hydrogen, and a number of other things. We'll just flip to the next one. So our region is actually made up of 14 different municipalities. The city of Edmonton is in the center of this and is the largest population base. But again, we cover about 1 million hectares of space that's just agriculture, and larger than that overall. And the purpose of our organization is to radically transform and grow the economy of the Edmonton metropolitan region. So if we flip to the next slide, really to get a bit more into agriculture, the piece that we're really focused on is this value-added component. As I mentioned earlier, we produce a huge amount of food, way more food than we could ever eat as a population. And as the world becomes more and more kind of food scarce, it's very important for us to help move international products to markets. One of the challenges we have is that almost everything right now that leaves Canada goes with no value added to it. So it's really raw ingredients rather than having that value added really foods. So the big goal that we have is to attract international investment into our region that's really focused on value added. The 2 areas that we're most interested in initially is things like canola crushing, so that we have the actual canola oils, and also pulse or plant protein fractionation. So breaking apart those peas, beans, and lentils and other crops to get at the actual proteins, so that we can start to do more value added at it. And again, those are 2 crops that we grow more of than anywhere else in the world. And so we really want to take more advantage of that. We have a very large workforce in food and ag, and we actually do have really quite significant international investment. But again, most of that is about exporting out those raw products. If we can drop to the next slide. One of the things that makes us, we think unique and attractive to international investment is how our urban centers and our rural centers really play together. So it's the ability to have crops that are grown, and we've got blended agriculture and industrial, as well as really rural agriculture. So having these places close together and being able to use, the education centers, the population centers, the infrastructure that exists, combining that with where we have, farms, we think is a real advantage to us. And if we flip to the next one, and this is the province of Alberta, and that kind of centered darker red is where we sit. So that darker red really is to highlight where we have exceptional soils, some of the richest soils in the world, as well as really favorable growing conditions in terms of sunlight. We often, hear stories about Canada being, quite north and quite cold. Our summers, though, are amazing. We almost have about 20 hours of sunlight in our peak growing seasons. And we're at about the same latitude as places like Dublin, Manchester, Hamburg. So, we're not super north when you look at other places, especially in Western Europe and Northern Europe. So it's that mix of strong soils, reliable, predictable rain. So we don't need to do really anything with, with watering, and that sunlight. The other thing we've started to add in is more incentives. So things like a value-added tax credit. So companies that are investing in our region in value-added can have a 12% tax reduction. We also have a number of incentives in things like petrochemicals, but really it's this linkage between agricultural projects and things like biofuels that we start to leverage those other incentives as well. And all of this is within a foreign trade zone. So our entire region is a foreign trade zone. So if you set up anywhere inside that space, you can access all of those benefits. And if we flip to the next slide. So again, talking a little bit about the different areas, and not that this is prescriptive because you can set up anywhere in a region to take advantage of this, but we're seeing areas that are really beginning to emerge as more plant proteins and grains, areas that are more focused on renewables and kind of the leftovers of value added that might be going into waste. We're now trying to turn those into biofuels and more food processing. So it's really trying to take advantage of where we're rural and where we're urban, and really blending those pieces together. We can drop to the next slide. Canada as a whole, we actually have more trade agreements with other OECD countries, other G7 countries, than any other country in the world. So we have a very robust network of trade agreements. And that really helps us open up to about 1.3 billion people or 1.5 billion people that we have good trade agreements with. And if we flip to the next slide, what we're really seeing is that there's countries around the world that are trying to access other markets, whether that's into the United States or into Asia, and are trying to find what are the routes where they can do value-added agriculture and then move on. And we just happen to sit, and again, the world is north. Those northern trade routes actually make us really attractive, whether you're moving product by air or by sea. We're actually significantly closer than most other places. And because the way that our foreign trade zone works, if you're doing a 30% value add on top of whatever you're bringing in, you can then sell those products on as a made in Canada. So if you're trying to access, North America and the US in particular, the pathway through Canada makes a lot of sense. And if you're American or others in the Americas trying to access Europe or trying to access especially Asia, because we have so many trade agreements there, you can actually, again, do things in other parts of the world, bring them into our region, do that value added on top of them, and then move them on to other parts of the world as a made in Canada product and access those other trade agreements. We're finding that very, very successful. And I'll just close with one other piece here, is that we're not only doing work across, if you flip to the next slide, in agriculture, we're doing work in hydrogen and clean tech. We're one of the global centers in hydrogen. We are actually producing, if our region was a country, we'd be in the top 10 in the world right now in the production of hydrogen. And we're about to open the world's largest net zero hydrogen facility. That'll be open next year. And that's only one of about $30 billion of investments that are coming here in net zero. So we have major projects coming in that net zero, including projects that are agricultural focused. We're doing a lot in life sciences, especially in pharmaceuticals. And we're, again, really leveraging our relationships with the rest of the world through Port Alberta. And again, also really trying to layer in artificial intelligence and machine learning, because we are one of the leading places in the world for that. The University of Alberta that is based here is third in the world for artificial intelligence, and it's first in the world for reinforcement learning. So it's really trying to layer these pieces together. And again, on the next slide, just trying to layer these pieces together, federal programs, provincial programs, local programs, really through collaboration relationships is what Port Alberta is about. So thank you very much. I think I'm just outside of that 10 minutes.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Chris. And, you know, we understood all the advantages and the strengths of your region. Maybe there are some drawbacks just to encourage the other to compete. So thank you very much. I'm in particular interested in the compatibility between, you know, energy, traditional energy exploitation with agricultural in the same region, something which might be challenging. It's also very interesting for us to understand this concept of broad special economic zone at the size more or less of the whole province. So it's something which is very specific, and I'm sure we will have questions for you. So now let's move to another model, which is the French one and the recent policy of territoire d'industrie, territories for industry. It will be presented by Mr. Alexandre Mas, who is a project leader for this policy in the National Agency for Territorial Cohesion of the French government. So Alexander will speak in French, but the slides are in English. So thank you very much. La parole est à vous.
Merci Claire. Thank you Claire. Can you all hear me correctly?
Perfectly well.
Parfait. Donc, merci beaucoup Claire et merci à tous. Merci à l'OCDE pour cette invitation pour présenter un programme de développement économique centré sur les territoires qui, en effet, sort un peu des programmes habituels que l'on peut rencontrer. Donc, le programme Territoire d'industrie, next slide, pour présenter directement la carte. Voilà. Le programme Territoire d'industrie est un programme d'envergure nationale, mais qui ne couvre pas tout le territoire et qui, en fait, incarne le volet territorial de la politique industrielle de la France. Jusqu'à présent, jusqu'à son lancement en 2018, la plupart des politiques industrielles étaient essentiellement tournées dans des logiques de filières, de travailler sur des grandes filières industrielles qui ont fait la réussite de l'industrie française, que ce soit le luxe, le nucléaire, l'automobile, l'aéronautique. On avait des filières fortes, mais l'enjeu dans le cadre d'un développement industriel, mais aussi dans le cadre d'un aménagement du territoire, était d'avoir une politique qui puisse regrouper regrouper les deux et d'être à l'intersection des deux. C'est dans cette logique que le programme Territoire d'industrie a été lancé et donc qui vise en fait à labelliser et à accompagner les territoires qui se déclarent et les plus industriels et qui ont envie d'industrie, qui ont une stratégie d'industrie, qui ont envie de développer ou redévelopper leur industrie. Et le but de ce programme, c'est de les accompagner dans ce sens. Alors aujourd'hui, le programme, comme vous pouvez le voir sur la carte, couvre à peu près la moitié du territoire, couvre la moitié des communes et des intercommunalités de France et à peu près la moitié également de la population, 30 millions d'habitants, donc un peu moins de la moitié. Ce périmètre peut être amené à évoluer et en fait s'appuie vraiment sur la volonté des territoires de rejoindre cette dynamique. Quand il a été lancé, on avait 124 territoires d'industrie. Aujourd'hui, on en a 149, donc ce périmètre évolue en fonction des envies des territoires qui souhaitent rejoindre la démarche en voyant le succès que ça a pu représenter pour d'autres. Et donc, en fait, ce programme, et c'est l'enjeu de la présentation, repose essentiellement en fait sur une dynamique, sur une gouvernance. Et c'est ce qu'on peut voir sur la slide suivante. Une gouvernance qui, en fait, vise à faire travailler les territoires, à donner l'initiative, donner carte blanche, donner cette initiative au territoire pour faire émerger des projets. Jusqu'à présent, on avait surtout des logiques de stratégie un peu top-down, en bon français, des stratégies venant du haut. Là, l'objectif, c'est de partir des bonnes idées du territoire pour faire émerger des projets. Et pour cela, en fait, l'enjeu, c'est de mettre autour de la table tous ceux qui ont les capacités d'intervention sur les sujets industriels. Et donc, jusqu'à présent, on voyait les logiques d'industrie avec les grandes filières industrielles, avec les industriels en eux-mêmes. Mais là, le but, c'est de réunir tous ceux qui ont leur mot à dire et qui ont leur capacité à faire accélérer ou, dans les cas négatifs, à freiner des projets industriels. Donc, le but, c'est de réunir tout le monde pour faire émerger des projets, pour créer une usine à projet. Donc, le but, c'est de mettre autour de la table, dans chacun de ces territoires, les élus, les maires, les présidents de communautés de communes, de mettre aussi autour de la table les industriels de ce territoire, mais aussi tous ceux qui ont les moyens administratifs, techniques et financiers d'accompagner ces acteurs, d'accompagner ces industriels et de créer des projets industriels. C'est de réunir tout cet écosystème public et privé qui a les moyens d'aider ces projets. Donc, ça peut être des acteurs de l'État, comme la Caisse des dépôts et consignations, donc qui est la grande banque publique de dépôt et qui a des moyens d'intervention pour soutenir des projets sur des sujets d'immobilier, par exemple. C'est mettre également autour de la table l'ADEME, qui est l'agence nationale en charge de la transition énergétique. Ça peut être aussi BPI France, qui est la banque publique d'investissement en charge de l'innovation notamment. Ça peut être aussi également Pôle emploi, qui est l'acteur national en charge des sujets d'emploi et de chômage. Voilà. Le but, c'est de mettre autour de la table tous ces acteurs pour faire sortir des projets. Et c'est ce qu'on a pu faire sur cette première année, sortir sur ces lancements depuis 2018, sortir plus de 1800 projets. Le deuxième point sur lequel je voulais revenir, c'est le choix des territoires. Donc, s'appuie sur une démarche participative. Les territoires s'inscrivent dans la démarche, mais on avait un objectif qui était de toucher les territoires les plus industriels et qui sont les territoires qui aujourd'hui manquaient de cette animation et de ces capacités à se regrouper. Et donc, de fait, ce sont essentiellement des territoires ruraux qui correspondaient à cette définition et qui étaient ceux sur lesquels on voulait intervenir, des territoires ruraux et des territoires de petites villes, dans une logique d'aménagement du territoire et de développement de l'industrie dans tous les territoires. Aujourd'hui, en France, plus de 75% de l'emploi industriel est hors des métropoles. Donc, alors que les métropoles attirent la majorité des investissements dans les services, la majorité des activités et des populations, l'emploi industriel en France, il est hors des métropoles, il est dans ces territoires ruraux. Et nous, le but, c'était d'accompagner ces territoires. Et donc, plus de la moitié des communes territoires d'industrie sont dans les territoires les plus ruraux de France. Et donc, c'est ces territoires qu'on voulait accompagner prioritairement. Et sur on peut passer à la dernière slide pour voir maintenant concrètement comment on voulait aider ces territoires, quels dispositifs on a mis en place pour cela. Alors, la particularité de territoire d'industrie, c'est qu'on est sur un dispositif sans outil fiscal propre, en particulier sans outil fiscal propre pour ce dispositif. On a préféré créer, donc, comme je l'ai dit, une dynamique locale pour faire émerger des projets et pour aider ces projets de mettre en face des outils nationaux, des outils régionaux pour accompagner ces projets. Alors, je voulais revenir sur 3 types d'outils qui me paraissent être les plus intéressants pour cet échange. Le premier, ce sont les VTE, les volontariats territoriaux en entreprise, qui s'appuient sur un modèle que vous connaissez peut-être, qui est le volontariat international en entreprise, qui est un dispositif qu'a mis en place la France pour aider ces étudiants et les jeunes diplômés à aller travailler à l'étranger dans des entreprises françaises ou étrangères, mais à l'étranger. Et on a reproduit ce modèle pour attirer les jeunes diplômés, attirer les talents dans les territoires d'industrie, donc des territoires plus ruraux qui ont des grandes difficultés à attirer les talents et la jeunesse extérieure. Deuxième dispositif sur lequel je voulais revenir, qui est ce qu'on appelle les sites clés en main, qui est un ensemble de 127 sites labellisés partout en France, qui sont en fait des sites, comme leur nom l'indique, clé en main au sens où la plupart des autorisations administratives ont été levées avant l'implantation des industriels. Voilà. Aujourd'hui, un industriel, s'il souhaite s'implanter sur un de ces sites, il sait qu'il n'est pas en zone inondable, toutes les autorisations environnementales sont levées. Et donc, il n'a plus qu'à mettre en place à valider son permis de construire et des autorisations propres à son domaine d'activité. Mais toutes les autorisations préalables sont levées. Et donc, ces sites situés en territoire d'industrie, principalement dans les territoires ruraux, accueillent de plus en plus d'acteurs français, mais surtout d'acteurs extérieurs. Et ils sont mis en avant chaque année dans le cadre du sommet Choose France, qui est le grand sommet d'attractivité des investissements industriels étrangers en France, sous la direction du président de la République. Et le dernier outil que je voulais mettre en avant, c'est des moyens d'ingénierie dédiés du programme Territoire d'industrie qui aident tous ces acteurs du territoire à mettre en place des projets collectifs pour développer des projets d'envergure pour les territoires, très souvent des projets en lien avec la formation. On a pu créer plus de 180 centres de formation dans les territoires d'industrie, donc essentiellement dans les territoires ruraux, pour former tous les publics, jeunes, moins jeunes, femmes, étudiants, chômeurs sur des métiers industriels pour pouvoir être embauchés dans l'industrie qui aujourd'hui cherche à recruter partout en France. Et enfin, pour terminer et pour un peu illustrer la réussite et le fonctionnement de ces territoires d'industrie, je voulais revenir sur deux exemples de projets industriels qui correspondent à toutes les cases de territoires d'industrie, qui sont des projets industriels sur l'industrie agroalimentaire. Le premier est celui en fait d'une chocolaterie, d'un fabricant de chocolat équitable dans le territoire du Gers, donc un territoire particulièrement rural, qui a réussi, dans le cadre d'un projet de territoire d'industrie, à implanter une nouvelle usine de fabrication de chocolat dans ce territoire, et en s'appuyant sur les aides des collectivités locales, de la Banque des territoires pour le foncier, pour sortir en un temps record une usine qui aujourd'hui produit du chocolat équitable, vendu partout en France et même vendu en Europe. Et un autre projet que je voulais mettre en avant, c'est un projet qui s'est installé sur un site clé en main, que je détaillais tout à l'heure, qui est un projet d'une usine de fabrication de pâtisserie et viennoiserie d'un industriel espagnol qui s'est implanté sur ce site clé en main parce ce site était disponible, parce qu'il était particulièrement bien placé dans ses axes de communication, parce qu'il avait de la main-d'œuvre disponible, qui s'est implanté sur ce site. C'est l'industriel Vicky Foods, industriel espagnol, qui s'est implanté sur ce site et qui est un exemple de réussite et de regroupement de tout ce qui peut faire la réussite de territoire d'industrie. Voilà, je ne veux pas être long pour respecter mon temps et suis ouvert pour toute question à la fin de la séquence.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Alexandre. And so now we can understand that there are also very bottom-up type of project, which are of course supported by national agencies, operator, ministries, but at the same time that take into account the territorial realities to adapt the attractiveness strategy, and it also include agro-food specialties. So thank you very much for this presentation. Now we have heard, different type of approaches. And to finish this overview, I suggest us to return to Costa Rica, but not on the investment side and rather on the export side, and they are very much related together, as it was reminded by Adriana before. And so let us to return to Costa Rica with Mr. Victor Romagna, who is an expert in trade and agricultural policies and member of the board of directors of Procomer. And Procomer is the export agency of Costa Rica. So I think that Victoria will speak in Spanish. And so, or I don't know, or English or Spanish, just to adapt for colleagues the language they opt for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. It's good to hear you. I have enough feedback here. Let me arrange this. Let me wait a second.
With pleasure. Just to inform participants and speakers, we have received a series of good questions, and I will package them and distribute them at the end of this session. Thanks a lot.
I'm back. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Maya and Claire, for setting this up, and of course, Jorge and his team at CINDE to supporting this great event. I'm going to switch back to Spanish, as I have the opportunity. I'm talking actually from Paraguay. I am teaching at an MBA program at the Universidad Católica de la Asunción here in Paraguay. So I'm joined here by my students. So I'm switching back to Spanish.
Español. Well, thank you very much. A pleasure to greet you, Ana, with whom we shared struggles in the OMC, Diana Garcia, and this Vice Minister Trejo. We were colleagues in the ministry.
Por supuesto, a los panelistas que me han antecedido, Chris y Alexander, por sus interesantes exposiciones. Vamos a ir un poquito atrás y me gustaría aclarar y destacar que Costa Rica ha sido un país muy exitoso en su inserción en la economía internacional. Los datos son contundentes. Destacan hoy en el país exportaciones de industrias
Export of industries that are complex, like medical devices, conductors, and entrepreneurial services. And in parallel, we have a very competitive food sector with pineapple, banana, coffee, where we are at the leadership position and high participation in world markets. This strategy of insertion that started more than 30 years ago after the debt crisis in Costa Rica, the success has been to identify very precisely the gaps and the bottlenecks and to act deliberately.
Problemas. Para promover la diversificación agrícola, que era una necesidad en su momento, hace 30 años, donde solo exportábamos unos pocos productos, desde CINDE precisamente se estableció un programa de descubrimientos agrícolas, o sea, nuevas actividades, no necesariamente disruptoras, pero relacionadas con existentes y con potencial de tener de ventaja comparativa. Eso marcó una gran diferencia positiva en la generación de exportaciones, motivadas a su vez o promovidas por inversión extranjera que se estableció en el país. Y por supuesto generamos el régimen de zona franca, aprovechamos las externalidades que se presentan con la aglomeración y se han formado clústeres relacionados con los dispositivos médicos, por ejemplo, ¿verdad? Y en paralelo creamos a Procomer, que es la agencia promotora de exportaciones. En algunos casos, por ejemplo, se identificó la necesidad de bajar unilateralmente aranceles o traer el eslabón de la cadena que hacía falta para desarrollar la cadena completa de valor. Y así es como agresivamente atrajimos inversión para la formación de estos clústeres que operan hoy satisfactoriamente, como el de dispositivos médicos o el de semiconductores, ¿verdad? Y por supuesto, y como nos recordó nuestro colega de Canadá, Chris, que decía que la importancia de tener una plataforma comercial de acceso preferencial a la mayor parte del mundo es vital, y Costa Rica la tiene en casi toda América, Europa, China, Corea, aparte obviamente de ser un miembro de la OMC exitoso. Por supuesto que la liberalización del comercio y la atracción de inversiones por sí sola no garantiza un crecimiento más rápido, a menos de que eso venga acompañado por cambios en otras áreas de la economía, la reducción de las barreras de entrada a nuevas empresas, o sea, más competencia, fomento de mercados laborales más flexibles, la capacitación de la fuerza laboral, ¿verdad? Y la mejora de la infraestructura. En estas áreas tenemos una tarea pendiente en el país. Pero bueno, concentrémonos en un hecho ineludible, que es la concentración de la actividad económica en el centro, en el área metropolitana, en contraste con la periferia. Las características de esta divergencia en el desarrollo tienen que ver, por una parte, con la dotación de factores propios de las zonas rurales, que son distintos a las del área metropolitana, y ahí podemos citar, por ejemplo, una baja escolaridad de la fuerza laboral y una infraestructura limitada, ¿verdad? Pero también esta divergencia se origina, por otra parte, en la inercia y falta de acción de las políticas nacionales, que no es hasta ahora que hemos trazado, digamos, esto como prioridad para el país. Ahora, la búsqueda de convergencia debe ser secuencial y puede basarse en estrategias de desarrollo económico que ya, digamos, se han probado ser exitosas en el mundo y en el mismo Costa Rica anteriormente, ¿verdad? Que tienen que ver con conceptos de complejidad económica y el descubrimiento de la ventaja comparativa, los cuales ambos se fundamentan en el concepto de productividad como elemento fundamental, ¿verdad? En la última década, un grupo de economistas liderado por además dos economistas latinoamericanos, César Hidalgo y Ricardo Hausmann, han elaborado el concepto de la complejidad económica. Y esto tiene que ver con la posibilidad de atraer
with the possibility of attracting new investment and
diversificación de las exportaciones en sectores
exports in important sectors such as agriculture, which is one of the themes we are dealing with today. Basically, what they are suggesting is that the productivity of a country can be visualized observing the complexity of the goods it can export. As much as the countries grow, they diversify this product from what they used to do before. There is a connection with what they did before and what we have to improve, and aggregate complexity, knowledge. This is what is being determined by productivity, which determines income and ROI. So what is obvious is that the difference between countries and, in this case, regions, can be explained by the type of product produced. So obviously, what we all want is to go forth in the value chain and produce more complex goods, more productive, and that generate more well-being. How to do it? Well, to discover where I have my advantage based on what I did before. So if I know that today Costa Rica has success in several sectors, like the medical devices again, semiconductors, services for businesses, and on the other hand, I know that I have success in agriculture, the goal of this study that implies geographical unity will let us know what are the links between these industries and how I can move towards new industries that imply more knowledge, more complexity, more productivity.
If you can conclude just for us to have some time for questions. Thanks a lot.
I have still a couple of minutes. Thank you very much. So what do we see today? Costa Rica has important advantages in these sectors, as Chris said. In fact, following the logic of forest, we can move and then find the convergence between the different areas, right? The other dilemma that the country faces is that in order to move towards more productive activities, we need a workforce that is better trained. But even if we were as successful as Finland educationally, this will only happen at the long term in one generation. We have to take advantage of the existing workforce for activities that can utilize it the best. So we talk about agriculture and tourism. It has to be an integral approach. We cannot wait till the incentives come.
Resolver todo, ni esperar que las condiciones de competitividad de la periferia sean ideales para que llegue la inversión. Pues como dijo Keynes, y esto le va a hacer gracia a mis alumnos, en el largo plazo todos estamos muertos. Así que yo creo que para concluir, Costa Rica está muy bien posicionada para aprovechar los desafíos hoy del cambio climático, los eventos geopolíticos, los recientes shocks de oferta que hemos visto como la pandemia, porque tenemos una ubicación privilegiada, tenemos una plataforma comercial envidiable, además tenemos una disponibilidad de energía sostenible y una vocación en general de sostenibilidad que hacen al país exitoso, además de empresas que ya operan aquí en diversos sectores. Por lo tanto, hoy sabemos más y tenemos las herramientas adecuadas. Necesitamos tener un sentido de urgencia en la atracción de inversiones y atraer de forma explícita proyectos agrícolas al tiempo que promovemos la competitividad de las zonas rurales. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Victor, for this comprehensive presentation. We have not a lot of time and we have many questions, so I will select some of them and please be sure that we will respond and transfer your questions to the different speakers. So one question first to colleagues. It's a general question. Have you observed in Canada or in Italy or in France some kind of, or in Costa Rica, some kind of, how could I say, competition that impact negatively on domestic firms? So to what extent these advantages which are provided to foreign trade, foreign companies can be detrimental to local firms? This is the first type of question. There is one question on the side of France, which is quite a traditional question for this policy. How does the aid received by the investors in this industry territory materialize? What do they receive concretely to implement their activity? So this is a second question. Another question, sorry, if a question for Chris. Since the entire zone can be a zone with foreign trade advantages, whatever company can come and directly benefit from it by locating in the region. So it's something that would need to be precised as requested by some questions here. And we have also colleagues who want to launch in Latvia special economic zone, but we will come back to them directly.
There are different types of programs and processes that they can take advantage of.
Thank you very much. Let's go to France. Alexandre, please.
Sur la deuxième question, je rejoins aussi les réponses de mes collègues au sens où tant les entreprises étrangères que françaises ont accès aux mêmes dispositifs sur territoire d'industrie dans les territoires d'industrie. Et sur la question qui me concernait, de pouvoir venir autour de tous ceux qui ont des moyens d'action et en fonction du projet de donner la meilleure aide possible. Alors ça peut être, si on a un sujet d'implantation immobilière, on a des acteurs spécialisés dans le montage de projets immobiliers avec des moyens financiers qui leur permettent d'avoir un intérêt et de ne pas être ne pas être propriétaire de leurs murs, d'avoir des montages financiers immobiliers assez intéressants. On peut avoir des moyens de droit commun, de soutien aux matériellement. Il y a un humain qui sont mis à disposition des territoires pour les aider à monter les projets, vraiment des équipes de gestion de projets.
Thank you very much. It's time to conclude. I'm sure we will have, it's just a first step, and we will have a lot of following questions. Now to conclude, let me invite our colleague Sebastián Nieto Parra, who heads the Latin American Caribbean unit at the Development Center of the OECD. And we will see that in developing countries, there is a great interest, of course, for this both territorial disparities and attractiveness to investors through a special economic zone. So Sebastián, the floor is yours.
Merci, Claire. So that's a pleasure to be with you. And let me switch to Spanish, taking advantage of the interpreters that we have today with us. Pues fue un placer, la verdad, aprender y conocer más gracias a todos los.
Pleasure to learn from all the participants about different aspects of the special economic zone. We have learned much of the different sectors and vectors that can be included, the different regional experiences, and the elements to consider, such as the definition or the framework that one of these zones can have, what kind of opportunities are the best to have success, what kind of regulation, what kind of fiscal incentives, and all of this is of the essence for the case of Latin America, a region where we have to formalize and concretize more workforce that is better trained, and how the economic zones can play a fundamental role.
De la transformación estructural que necesita la región, y para esto pues nos ayudaría a una mejor inserción en las cadenas locales de valor, en las cadenas también regionales de valor y por último las cadenas globales de valor. Entonces, ¿qué tipo de modernización tecnológica, qué tipo de industrias se deben tener en cuenta para generar esa mejor inserción de nuestras empresas en América Latina? Entonces, creo que lo que hemos tenido en el día de hoy, y sobre todo yendo más allá en el proyecto que estamos llevando con nuestros compañeros de CFI, del Centro para el Emprendimiento en Regiones y Ciudades de la OCDE, pues nos lleva a pensar qué tipo de mecanismos, primero fiscales, regulatorios, qué tipo de inversión extranjera directa se necesita de calidad, qué tipo de infraestructuras, qué tipo de capital humano también en cada una de las regiones para generar el beneficio de estas zonas económicas especiales. Y es un proyecto que estamos haciendo en Argentina, Colombia y Chile, donde precisamente en el caso de Colombia y de Chile estuvimos visitando dos zonas económicas especiales. En el caso de Colombia en Palmira, que es en la zona pacífica, en el Valle del Cauca, que tiene unas ventajas cerca a una ciudad muy importante de Colombia como es Cali, también muy cerca de un puerto clave para el país como es Buenaventura, y pues puede generar el empleo formal que se necesita en esa región que ha sido afectada ampliamente por la violencia. Y también, pues lo conocimos el caso de Magallanes con la zona franca austral de Punta Arenas, donde nuevamente vemos políticas diferenciadas, donde vemos el caso de Chile, donde se han concentrado dos zonas económicas especiales, una en el norte del país, otra en el sur, y donde pues precisamente
The one in the south, where we see in what way we want to give continuity to these remote regions. What we have discussed today is very important for the project about regional development in this new global context in Chile. Thank you so much, Claire, again, for this invitation and for this seminar, for this webinar.
of course, from the European Commission, but also from Costa Rica, with whom we hope to continue our dialogue on regional attractiveness and development. I want also to underline, how could I say, the very multi-dimensional characteristics of a special economic zone, which motivate us to bring colleagues from the Trade and Agricultural Directorate, from the Development Center, from the Directorate of Financial Affairs and Investment, all together with our regional competences to share the views and contribute to this holistic understanding of what could motivate and bring to success special economic zone. So I want also to thank persons online who asked a lot of questions, who participated to the whole seminar this afternoon. Thank, of course, our interpreters, and in particular my colleagues who organized this event, and Maya Camacho, that now everybody knows. So thanks a lot. We will now prepare a wrap-up document to shed light on the main messages learned from this discussion that clearly calls for follow-up and future knowledge sharing. It will also serve as an input to our report on rethinking regional attractiveness in the new global environment that we will publish early in July, and of course you will be informed about this launching. So thank you again.